Have you ever found yourself trapped in a discussion where, despite pouring out every argument, every nuance, every carefully chosen word, you walked away feeling like you lost? Not just lost the argument, but lost a piece of your own conviction? Have you ever felt that choking knot in your throat, a silent scream of frustration, as if every utterance had pushed you further from your own core strength? Perhaps your world is crowded with loud voices, people who interrupt, mock, dominate environments with an arrogance they cleverly disguise as confidence. They ride the waves of their own noise, drowning out anything that dares to challenge their narrative. You watch them, bewildered, as they carve out space for themselves through sheer volume, leaving you in the shadows of their verbal onslaught. This isn't just about winning a debate. It's about the very air you breathe, the respect you command, the influence you wield, or, crucially, the influence you fail to exert. And maybe, deep down, you've been conditioned to believe that staying silent was a sign of weakness, an unforgivable surrender, that not defending yourself meant letting them win, that not reacting was tantamount to losing the game entirely. This is the first, most insidious lie they sell you, a trap designed to keep you entangled in their web of verbal combat. But what if I told you that all of this is an illusion, a meticulously crafted performance designed to drain your energy and steal your power? What if the true leverage, the ultimate unyielding strength, has never been found in words, but precisely in their absence? Nietzsche, one of history's most profoundly misunderstood yet brutally honest thinkers, saw something few have the courage or the sheer strategic intelligence to admit. He exposed the grand deception that binds most of humanity to a reactive, subservient existence. Those who talk too much don't just reveal too much. They reveal their need to be heard, their desperation for validation. They are the open books in a world of predators, laying bare their insecurities, their biases, their entire strategic playbook without even realizing it. Those who feel the constant urge to convince are already operating from a position of profound disadvantage. The modern world, a cacophony of endless chatter and immediate reactions, relentlessly teaches us that we must fight, explain ourselves, defend our ideas as if every conversation were a desperate battle for the truth. We are told to engage, to articulate, to dominate the discourse. But this is the engagement trap, a mental and emotional prison that forces you into a constant state of defense. Nietzsche proposed something entirely different, something far more subtle, infinitely more lethal, and devastatingly intelligent. It's a path that bypasses the battlefield altogether, turning the very act of not fighting into the ultimate victory. Consider the high-stakes world of international diplomacy or corporate mergers. The first party to reveal their bottom line, to articulate their true desperation, is the one who loses leverage. The silence from the opposing side isn't empty. It's pregnant with possibility, forcing the other to fill the void with concessions and fears. Nietzsche believed that silence isn't merely an absence of noise. It is an overwhelming, an almost tyrannical presence. Silence disorients. It destabilizes. It forces the other party to confront not you, but themselves. It's a psychological weapon, a mirror held up to their own bluster, their own insecurities. This isn't for the faint of heart, or for those who still cling to the comfort of conventional social niceties. This profound insight is for you, who constantly feels ignored, overshadowed, invalidated by the sheer volume of others. For you, who leaves conversations with the gnawing feeling that no one truly heard what you meant to say, only what they wanted to project onto you. You are tired of being the easy target, the nice one, who strives to keep the peace, while others greedily exploit your calm, your patience, your very essence. Perhaps you've tragically confused your silence with submission, a fatal error in judgment. But today, we tear down that illusion. Today, I will reveal how silence can become your most formidable weapon, and how true victory doesn't come from winning a single argument, but from never needing to enter one in the first place. Get ready to shed the shackles of conventional wisdom and see silence in a brutal, new light, not as an absence of response, but as the definitive, crushing response. We're about to plunge into the chilling depths of Nietzsche's philosophy, to discover how to master any situation, dominate any room, and outmaneuver any opponent without uttering a single word. Why do we feel such an overwhelming, almost pathological, need to respond, to rebut, to correct, to relentlessly prove that we are right? Because, deep within our social conditioning, we have been programmed to believe that the truth, or at least our version of it, must be defended tooth and nail. We fear that if we remain silent, we are allowing others to win, to rewrite the narrative, to usurp our perceived authority. But Nietzsche, with his piercing insight, recognized this as a profound symptom of our deepest, most debilitating weakness. The primal fear of appearing weak, of being perceived as anything less than intellectually formidable or morally righteous. And behind this pervasive fear, lurking like a parasitic beast, lies the ego. A fragile, insatiable ego that cannot tolerate being questioned, that instantly confuses disagreement with a direct, personal attack, and that compulsively transforms any conversation, any exchange of ideas, into a scorched earth battlefield. This is the ego's desperate scream, a self-defeating reflex that sabotages genuine influence. In economics, this manifests as negotiators who over-explain their position, revealing vulnerabilities, or politicians who incessantly defend every policy, exposing the cracks in their carefully constructed facade. Machiavelli himself understood that a prince who feels the constant need to explain himself to his subjects, rather than simply act, invites scrutiny and ultimately contempt. His silence was often his greatest strength, allowing others to project their fears and hopes onto his stoic presence, making him seem both inscrutable and immensely powerful. The relentless chatter of the insecure often serves only to amplify their own powerlessness, while strategic silence consolidates power, making you an unreadable force. Nietzsche famously declared that most people do not seek the truth when they argue. They seek power. They seek to reaffirm their own shaky beliefs, not because those beliefs are inherently solid, but because if they are shaken, everything else in their fragile world crumbles. Argumentation, in this chilling sense, is not a tool of wisdom or enlightenment. It is a desperate, defensive armor, a frantic cry from the ego to maintain absolute control of the narrative, to avoid the terrifying chasm of self-doubt. It's a performance, a theatrical display of presumed strength, designed to intimidate and exhaust. And what does this brutal truth mean for you? It means that the very moment you feel compelled to justify yourself, to prove your point, to enter the verbal fray, you have already stepped onto their chessboard and lost the opening gambit, because the simple, raw need to justify your position instantly signals that you are still trapped in the desperate desire to be accepted, validated, understood, and ultimately approved of. Nietzsche called this the herd morality, the insidious, collective behavior of those who live their entire lives under the crushing weight of others' expectations. They crave to be seen as good, correct, just, and conforming. But this ceaseless quest for external approval, this hunger for validation, is precisely what keeps you weak, bound by invisible chains forged in societal expectations. It's the exploitation trap of the polite, the compliant, the endlessly justifying. True strength, Nietzsche asserted with unapologetic force, lies not in convincing others, but in the absolute, unshakable refusal to need to do so. It is found in holding your vision, your truth, your self-worth, even in the face of widespread laughter, vitriolic criticism, and outright rejection. It is in being fundamentally misunderstood and remaining utterly unshaken, an immovable object in a world of easily swayed opinions. Consider the quiet resolve of a nation pursuing its strategic interests despite global outcry, or a CEO who calmly executes a vision while critics scream from the sidelines. Their power comes from an internal locus of control, a profound disinterest in external validation. What Nietzsche proposes to us is a type of power that is not measured in fleeting verbal victories, but in profound internal mastery. It is a power that emanates from the chilling ability to remain perfectly calm, centered, and unreactive while everyone around you is spiraling into chaos, losing their emotional and rational footing. This is a power that grows exponentially the moment you cease to be a puppet of reaction. If you truly wish to win, not just battles, but the entire war of influence and existence, you need to internalize this brutal truth. The game of discussion, of verbal combat, is nothing more than a carefully orchestrated theater, and the first one to stand up and begin to act, to deliver their lines, has already fundamentally lost. Nietzsche knew, with chilling clarity, that the reactive mind is a subjugated mind, forever dancing to the tunes played by others. The observing mind, however, that is the truly dangerous one. It operates from a superior vantage point, utterly devoid of the desperate need to prove anything to anyone. It's the silent predator, watching, waiting, calculating. But then, if we are to remain silent, if we are to transcend the need to react, how then can we exert power over others? If words, by their very nature, betray us, how do we compel others to feel our strength, to acknowledge our presence, without uttering a single phrase? Nietzsche had a radical, almost terrifying answer for this, and it lies in the audacious ideal of the Übermensch, the overman, a being who consciously transcends the limitations of common morality, who shatters the chains of societal conditioning, and who ultimately dominates their world through absolute, uncompromising self-control and an unyielding will to power. This is the blueprint for strategic power, a manual for the silently dominant. In the next part, we will dissect this awe-inspiring figure, understanding how the Übermensch embodies the strategic use of silence, not as mere absence, but as a weapon of ultimate, irreversible dominance. Are you truly ready for this level of profound, strategic transformation? Because from this moment forward, silence ceases to be a passive state and begins its terrifying, eloquent speech. Nietzsche did not write for the meek, the compliant, or the eternally compromising. He wrote for the audacious few who possess the terrifying courage to look deep within their own abyss, to confront their inherent misery, their ingrained weaknesses, and to brutally transform them into an unstoppable, unyielding strength. For him, the common human being lives perpetually trapped by the suffocating conventions of society, by the crushing weight of moralistic dogma, and by the desperate, insatiable need for others' applause and validation. They are willing captives in a psychological cage of their own making, forever seeking external affirmation. But there exists another type of being, a rare, dangerous, and utterly free individual. The Übermensch, the overman, does not merely react to the world, perpetually bouncing off its demands and expectations. No, the Übermensch actively, deliberately, and powerfully shapes the world in their own image, according to their own formidable will. And the most chillingly impressive aspect of this transformation? They often accomplish this feat in complete, profound silence. The Übermensch does not waste precious energy trying to win petty debates. They do not descend into the arena of cheap, emotional games where every word is a potential vulnerability. Instead, they observe with surgical precision. They understand with a depth that eludes the noisy masses. They carefully, strategically choose when to speak, and, far more importantly, when to remain silent. For they have grasped a fundamental truth that others ignorantly dismiss. Silence is not just a form of language, it is the master language, a language that does not try to convince, cajole, or persuade. It simply, undeniably, imposes presence. The silence of the Übermensch is not empty. It is a palpable threat. It is an unassailable authority. It is the chilling sound of absolute self-mastery, a declaration of impenetrable resolve. While others shout, desperate for attention and validation, the Übermensch commands profound respect with merely a penetrating gaze. While others frantically explain their positions, justifying every move, the Übermensch observes, and in their tranquil observation, they reveal others' weaknesses merely by their unsettling calm, their refusal to engage. Their silence is a formidable wall, an impenetrable fortress. Those on the other side, trapped in their own frantic chatter, despair. They frantically try to guess what lies behind that stoic, unyielding facade. And in that very despair, that desperate need to fill the void, they make catastrophic mistakes. They reveal too much, expose their true intentions, and fundamentally lose their balance, their strategic footing. This profound silence is not, under any circumstances, passivity. It is active, absolute control of one's own precious energy. It is strategic economy, a calculated withholding of information and emotion. The Übermensch understands, with chilling clarity, that every spoken word is a revealed move on the strategic chessboard of life. Every emotional reaction, every involuntary twitch of vulnerability is an exposed weak point, an invitation for attack. That is precisely why they remain utterly quiet, not because they have nothing profound to say, but because they have transcended the primal need to say anything to anyone. Their sheer, unshakable presence already speaks volumes, and more than that, it deeply disturbs, because their silence forces others to look inward, to deal with their own internal noise, their own anxieties, their own desperate need for external validation. In a society drowning in a ceaseless deluge of noise, those who master silence are not just kings, they are gods among men. This is the strategic leverage in every interaction, from a boardroom negotiation where silence compels a competitor to break first, to a geopolitical standoff where a nation's refusal to comment speaks louder than any declaration. Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch as the ultimate architect of their own existence, one who creates their own values, their own rules, their own unshakable morality. They do not depend on anyone's fleeting validation, on any societal nod of approval, and that, precisely, is why they are so profoundly feared, because nothing destabilizes the common man more than an individual who simply cannot be manipulated by guilt, by fear, or by the universal, desperate need for acceptance. Their silence is the impenetrable shield against all these insidious psychological mechanisms. When, and only when, the Übermensch does choose to speak, it is because their words are not merely meant to persuade. They are meant to topple an empire, to redefine reality, to inflict a decisive, irreversible blow. But this raises an essential, unsettling question for us. What makes such strategic silence so profoundly unsettling, so utterly terrifying for others? Why do so many people feel viscerally threatened when someone simply chooses not to react, not to engage in their frantic dance? What cataclysmic psychological event unfolds within the human mind when the expected confrontation, the anticipated verbal volley, is replaced by an overwhelming, inscrutable absence? The answer lies deep within the dark recesses of human psychology, a truth that Nietzsche intuitively grasped long before modern science provided the empirical data. And that is precisely what we will explore now. Because to truly harness the formidable power of silence, we first need to understand the profound chaos, the existential terror it generates in the minds of others. And believe me, the implications are far deeper and far more disturbing than they seem on the surface. Silence is not just the mere absence of sound, it is a mirror, a brutal, unforgiving mirror. And what it reflects back to most people is utterly, horrifyingly unbearable. It holds up their true selves, their unmasked insecurities, their desperate need for control, for all to see. When you make the deliberate, strategic choice not to react, you are not merely silencing yourself. You are, with surgical precision, forcing the other person to hear the deafening echo of their own voice, to confront their own arguments, their own bluster, their own desperate posturing, without the comforting buffer of external resistance. And that, my friends, utterly destabilizes them. Why? Because most people do not speak to genuinely express themselves, to share wisdom, or to seek truth. They speak to protect themselves, to frantically convince themselves of their own worth, and, most critically, to hide the gaping emptiness that exists between what they say and who they truly are. And then, when you remain absolutely silent, their meticulously constructed disguise shatters. Their carefully curated facade collapses into dust. Social psychology has unequivocally shown that in confrontational situations, a lack of response, strategic silence, is almost universally perceived as profound judgment. It doesn't matter if you are simply listening, absorbing, analyzing. The speaker immediately begins to feel exposed, vulnerable, profoundly insecure. Why? Because without your expected response, without your reaction, they lose their vice-like grip on the narrative. They lose control over the interaction's direction. The human brain, a primitive organ at its core, immediately goes into a state of high alert. The amygdala, that ancient region of fear and anxiety, activates, screaming danger. The other person begins to frantically project their deepest fears and insecurities onto your inscrutable silence. Is he judging me? Did he notice my insecurity, my verbal fumble? Does he know I'm bluffing, that my confidence is a thin veneer? And in this high-stakes psychological battlefield, silence acts like an invisible blade, a precision instrument of psychological warfare. It cuts where no one can visibly see, but where everyone, without exception, viscerally feels the wound. Nietzsche, in his profound wisdom, sensed this brutal truth long before modern psychology quantified it. For him, the average person lives as a perpetual slave to their immediate reactions, to their impulses, to the herd's dictates. They act on raw instinct, react out of base vanity, and speak out of a crippling fear of being forgotten, of fading into insignificance. The superior spirit, the one who has mastered themselves, who has forged an unyielding will, remains silent because they know, with chilling certainty, that every single word given is a precious piece of information, a strategic advantage handed directly to the enemy. Every emotional reaction, every flinch, every involuntary gasp is an involuntary scream that precisely reveals where to attack, where the psychological armor is thinnest. Moreover, and this is crucial, strategic silence has a devastating, almost incapacitating effect on manipulators. People who thrive on the emotional control of others, who feed on your reactions to sustain their parasitic game, are utterly dependent on your emotional responses to stay in control. When you flatline your reactions, when you offer nothing but a chilling, inscrutable silence, you instantly break their cycle of exploitation. The manipulator, starved of their sustenance, panics. They desperately need your validation, your outrage, your fear, to validate their own twisted position, to prove their power. Without it, they lose themselves, they unravel, they reveal the profound weakness, the raw insecurity they have tried so desperately hard to hide beneath layers of charm and gaslighting. But there is something even deeper, more primal. Silence also, with brutal efficiency, triggers unresolved pains. It activates dormant traumas of rejection, abandonment, humiliation, and deep-seated insignificance, because suddenly the other person realizes they are not the center of your universe, that their words are not enough to move you, that their very presence does not make an impact on your serene, unshakable core. And this, for the narcissistic ego, is utterly intolerable. That is why, when you remain silent, when you refuse to play their game, you are not just defending yourself, You are launching a surgical attack where it hurts the most, at the very center of their meticulously constructed illusion of self-importance. This is why true silence requires a terrifying strength. It is uncomfortable, not just for others, but for you as well, because it brutally goes against everything that has been taught, against the ingrained impulse to react, to justify oneself, to explain oneself. But it is precisely for this reason that it is so profoundly powerful, because it demands mastery, and mastery, as Machiavelli knew, is true power. Now that you possess this brutal understanding of how strategic silence operates within the fractured mind of the other, how it activates deep-seated insecurities, systematically breaks down their defenses, and ruthlessly unmasks their carefully curated postures, it is time to go further. It is time to stop being a mere observer, a passive recipient of knowledge, and transform yourself into an architect of influence, someone who wields this formidable strength intentionally, strategically, and with devastating precision. In this crucial next phase, you will discover exactly how to transform silence from a mere absence into a conscious surgical weapon. You will learn the dark art of how to win any argument, dominate any negotiation, and control any social dynamic without uttering a single compromising word. And when you master this, when this strategic power becomes ingrained in your very being, no one will ever be able to control you again. You will be an unreadable force, an immovable object in a world of easily manipulated minds. The moment of mere understanding has passed. The time has come to stop passively comprehending the power of silence and begin actively, ruthlessly, using it. Because knowledge without practice, without applied will, is nothing more than dead theory, a forgotten whisper in the winds of consequence. From this point forward, you will learn to transform your silence into a precision weapon, a psychological scalpel, no longer merely a defensive shield against the onslaught of others, but a sharp, cutting blade, ready to dissect the masks of others at the exact moment they least expect it. And the first, most brutal step in this transformation is deceptively simple. Be silent when your very will screams for a response. This requires an almost superhuman strength, because every fiber of your being will want to react, will want to justify itself, will want to prove that it is right, that it is valid. But that primal, reactive desire is poison, a self-inflicted wound. Every single time you succumb to it, you reveal that you are still operating under the control of others' opinions, that you still desperately care about what they think, that you are still, fundamentally, playing their game. True. Unyielding silence is born only when you brutally kill that need for external validation, when you understand, with absolute clarity, that you owe nothing to anyone, that the truth does not need to be spoken to exist, to manifest its undeniable reality. The second weapon of strategic silence is observation, honed to the precision of a master assassin, while others fall into the trap of endless chatter, getting lost in verbose explanations, frantically trying to fill every void with a torrent of words. You listen, but you do not listen as someone politely waiting for their turn to speak, eager to interject. No, you listen like a hunter listens to the barely audible footsteps of unseen prey in the deep, silent forest. You perceive the subtle tremors of fear hidden between the lines, the subtle contradictions in their narrative, the raw insecurities cunningly disguised as arrogant bravado. You dissect their body language, their vocal inflections, the unconscious tells that betray their true intentions, and you meticulously store all of this information, this psychological dossier, because when you do choose to speak, if you speak at all, your intervention will be surgical. It will be delivered with the devastating precision of someone who not only understands but profoundly masters the emotional and psychological territory of the other. It's like a grandmaster chess player, silent for minutes, calculating every possible move, every counter, before making a single, decisive play. The third weapon, one often underestimated, is time itself. Learn to let silence linger, to stretch it to its absolute psychological limit. The pause is not just an absence, it is an element of exquisite tension, and tension, as Machiavelli knew, is power. While the other person babbles, anxiously awaiting your reaction, your validation, and it simply does not come, they experience a profound internal collapse. The discomfort metastasizes. Their mind, desperate to fill the void, begins to generate its own assumptions, its own fears, its own escalating paranoia. A simple, unblinking look from you, accompanied by an unwavering silence, can have a far more crushing impact than 10 impeccably formulated sentences. It forces them into a reactive loop, making them betray their own hand. The fourth weapon, equally potent, is unpredictability. When you truly master strategic silence, you become an enigma, an unreadable force. And the unpredictable, by its very nature, is always feared, always treated with extreme caution. Why? Because people simply do not know what to expect from you, and when they lack that crucial knowledge, they lose their perceived advantage. They become cautious, meticulously measuring every single word, every gesture. You invert the entire logic of interaction. From being reactive, a mere pawn in their game, you become the gravitational center of the conversation, the silent arbiter of the dynamic. At this chilling point, silence is no longer an absence. It is pure, unadulterated dominance. But let us be acutely clear. Do not, under any circumstances, confuse this strategic silence with passivity, with weakness, with mere withholding. Nietzsche was never, not for a single moment, an advocate of weakness or quiet resignation. The silence we speak of here is intensely active, vibrating with tension, charged with a formidable, unyielding intention. You are not simply holding back. You are meticulously preparing, surgically choosing, strategically positioning yourself with a kind of strength that doesn't need to be loudly displayed, to be profoundly felt, to resonate in the very bones of those who encounter you. This is the strategic ambiguity of a global power, the inscrutable demeanor of a financial titan. And when the right, decisive moment comes, the precise instant when your profound silence has already communicated everything it needed to, when it has reshaped the entire psychological landscape, only then can you utter a single sentence, a precise comment, a surgical observation, something that brings the discussion to an absolute, undeniable end, not because it was the loudest, but because it was the truest, the deepest, the most utterly undeniable truth, a truth that cuts through all the noise like a laser. Yet, this profound insight brings us to an even more delicate, far more dangerous issue. Because up to this point, we have meticulously detailed how to wield silence to win, to dominate, to exert control. But there are moments, insidious situations, when the game is not merely about winning. It's about emotionally surviving, about safeguarding your very soul. There are situations where people are not just debating with you, they are systematically using you, subtly manipulating you, relentlessly draining your life force, siphoning off your power, and you, tragically, without even realizing it, are willingly giving away your power, piece by agonizing piece, every single day. You are being dominated, controlled, reduced, without a single word needing to be spoken. And that, my friends, is where the darkest, most terrifying point of this entire journey reveals itself. It's when silence is no longer a powerful strategy, but a silent scream of desperation from someone who has utterly lost control of their own life, their own narrative, their own destiny. In the next part, we will brutally expose this truth, showing how you may be currently used, exploited, and controlled, without even the faintest glimmer of awareness. Because while you delude yourself into thinking you are merely avoiding conflicts, meticulously preserving a false peace, someone, somewhere, may be systematically building an empire on the very foundation of your silence, on your compliant non-reaction. And Nietzsche, with his brutal foresight, already knew this. Is there anything more truly perverse, more soul-crushing, than being silenced? Only one thing: being conditioned, being psychologically programmed to believe that silence, specifically this kind of silence, is your only viable option. That swallowing your legitimate anger, conceding in every discussion, avoiding conflict at all costs, is the epitome of maturity, the pinnacle of wisdom. That remaining quiet, polite, and agreeable is a profound sign of balance, of inner harmony. But what if I told you that this, too, could be a trap? A meticulously constructed illusion designed to keep you subservient, malleable, and easily exploited? That many times, this type of silence is not wisdom, not maturity, but thinly disguised submission, an insidious form of psychological self-emasculation. Nietzsche, with his characteristic brutal clarity, saw this for what it was. What you naively call peace or harmony is often nothing more than your domesticated surrender, your willing participation in your own diminishment. Have you noticed how certain individuals, almost instinctively, take ruthless advantage of your calmness, your admirable ability to listen, to overlook slights, to diligently avoid confrontation? They relentlessly push their agendas, brazenly impose their wills, and greedily occupy spaces that were rightfully, inherently yours. And you, paralyzed by this programmed politeness, you let them, you rationalize it, you convince yourself that it's not worth fighting, that it's better to maintain a fragile harmony, that it's not that big of a deal. But the devastating truth, one you ignore at your peril, is this: you are paying an exorbitantly high price for this false, self-defeating peace. And the worst part, the truly agonizing part, is that you are being systematically used, exploited, and drained by those who, with chilling precision, understand that you will never, ever react. You are the perfect mark in their game of quiet dominance. Nietzsche spoke of the morality of slaves, a corrosive value system meticulously constructed by the weak to merely survive in a world they perceive as dominated by the strong. It is the morality of resignation, of self-imposed guilt, of an almost pathological compulsion to be nice, to be agreeable. It is an invisible, insidious code that meticulously teaches you to nullify yourself, to diminish your own worth, to conform to the lowest common denominator, and then, most tragically, to feel virtuous for it. It's the ultimate psychological scam, convincing you that your chains are crowns. But Nietzsche did not write for those who resign themselves to their fate, who embrace their shackles. He wrote for those who possess the untamed courage to shatter these chains, for those who awaken to the chilling realization that they are being used, being exploited, and who then make the profound, life-altering decision to stop participating in their own humiliating submission. When you accept this type of silence, the one that slowly devours you from within, corroding your spirit, you are silently surrendering your power, your will, your very essence, without even realizing the monumental cost. You are allowing yourself to be shaped, molded, and distorted by the fleeting expectations of others. You are no longer truly yourself. You are what others desperately need you to be, a reflection of their desires, a puppet on their strings. And this, precisely, is the absolute antithesis of what Nietzsche championed as the will to power. Because the true will to power is not to shout the loudest, not to dominate others through brute force. It is, first and foremost, to dominate oneself. It is to reclaim absolute control of your own narrative, your own existence, your own sovereign truth. It is to be silent not because you are afraid, but because you owe nothing, absolutely nothing, to anyone else's expectations or demands. This silence of submission, this self-imposed servitude, needs to die a brutal, unlamented death, and in its hallowed place, the silence of unshakable presence must be born. the one that does not bend, that does not humiliate itself, that does not apologize for its inherent, undeniable existence, the one that stands tall amidst the raging chaos and without uttering a single word fundamentally changes the entire course of the situation. This is the silence that Nietzsche would not only respect but revere, the silence of the individual who has, against all odds, become the undisputed master of themselves. But how does one truly reach this transcendent level? How does one systematically move from being a manipulated pawn to becoming the undisputed master of one's own formidable presence? How does one brutally kill the insidious herd morality within themselves and be reborn as an individual who imposes an unshakable authority, an undeniable influence, even when cloaked in the profound power of silence? The answer, the ultimate key, lies in the most potent and transformative figure of Nietzsche's entire philosophy, the Übermensch. We have touched upon him, glimpsed his profound potential. Now it is time to understand, with absolute clarity, how to become one. In this final, culminating chapter, you will discover what it truly takes to embody this new type of human being, this master of stillness, this silent sovereign, because the world does not need more empty talkers, more noisy participants in the great deception. It needs those rare, powerful individuals who have not only mastered silence but who choose to reign with it, to shape destiny from its inscrutable depths. We have reached the absolute final point of this transformative journey, and now I need you to grasp one truth with all the terrifying clarity possible, to let it sear itself into your very soul. Silence is not absence. It is not emptiness. It is not merely the space between sentences. True, strategic silence is pure, unadulterated presence. It is mastery. It is the undeniable sign that you are no longer passively reacting to the chaotic whims of the world. You are actively, deliberately, shaping it with your mere existence, with the profound weight of your non-engagement. Nietzsche never wrote for those who are content to merely survive, to merely exist within the boundaries set by others. He wrote for those who possess the terrifying courage to transcend, for those who are willing to tear off the suffocating masks that society has imposed, even if the act of liberation is agonizingly painful. The silence of the Übermensch is not the silence of the oppressed, nor of the coward, nor of the resigned. It is the stillness of the warrior who has already won, fundamentally, even before the battle has begun. It is the unshakable stillness of one who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone, because he knows, with an undeniable certainty, exactly who he is, and far more importantly, he knows, without a shadow of a doubt, precisely what he deserves. This is the truth, stripped bare. Now, I demand that you look unflinchingly at your own life. How many times have you remained tragically silent out of fear, out of misplaced guilt, out of a desperate, servile desire not to disturb the fragile peace? How many times have you let others decide for you, speak for you, brazenly trample over your sacred truth, reducing you to a mere echo? Enough. Nietzsche would declare that living this way is an unforgivable offense to existence itself, a betrayal of your own formidable potential, that accepting this kind of soul-crushing silence is betraying your very essence, your will to power. From today on, your silence needs to change its tone. It needs to stop being an escape, a retreat, and become, instead, an invisible, deafening shout of authority, a clear, unshakable boundary, an affirmation of who you are, even if no one around you truly understands its profound power. Because who you are does not need to be understood. It needs to be lived, fiercely and unapologetically, and that, above all else, demands courage. Do you possess that courage? Then comment below, right now. I choose the silence that commands respect. Do this not just so I know you made it this far, but so you can publicly affirm this profound choice, this sacred commitment to yourself, to your own liberation, because words have power, even when they speak about the most powerful force of all, silence. And do not stop here. The next video is essential. It will expand what you learned here and take your mind even further into the true depths of strategic power. Watch it not for me, but because you deserve to go beyond, to transcend, and remember this chilling truth. The weak shout, the strong remain silent, and the truly wise, choose when to unleash the terrifying power of both.